Is it possible we don't close more sales because we're seen as being too risky to prospects? Well, how risky are we being seen as to prospects? We start with the problem of the internal dialogue. What is the conversation that the prospect is having with him or herself regarding us, and particularly regarding risk? To put you in touch with your own internal dialogue, your own conversation with yourself, consider that for this moment you might be thinking, I need to pick up a quart of milk, or I wonder if the Yankees are going to win their next game, or why the hell am I spending time listening to this presentation on risk? That's the internal dialogue. So how do we find out what the internal dialogue is? That's what we're going to discuss here. How do we find it out, and what do we do about it? Here's a thought question. How may a buyer see us as a new supplier? Is it possible that they see themselves like on one bank and they have to cross a plank with a deep chasm down below to come over to our side to the salesperson? Could they see us as very risky? And how do we help them across the chasm? It might be the case that we need to take them on a journey on the change curve. Now, the change curve comes from a book called On Death and Dying, which describes the grieving, the mourning cycle. So in the beginning, the prospect is okay. They're happy with their current vendor. So we make a sales call and we show them some new ideas and why they might switch to us. And they say they don't need to switch. They're in a good place. So naturally, we provide them with a lot more evidence, and then they get angry at us and they get into resistance. In order for us to be effective as business developers, winning business away from the incumbent, where the prospect is relatively happy with the incumbent, we have to become experts at managing risk. We have to take the prospect on a journey around this curve, from resistance to exploration. We have to open his or her mind to new ideas so that they could really listen to what we have to say and hopefully become committed to change. The interesting thing, the paradox of change, is that the typical salesperson doing business development understands that they can't succeed unless the prospect will change. And yet so many salespeople hold themselves personally above change. They don't want to learn new methods, new training, etc. Now, if we educate the prospect in what we offer, but we don't address risk, we could easily run into the problem of the rubber band. You see, if you stretch a rubber band, that represents the education, but without the risk component addressed, it snaps back into shape. Or you could look at a mind the same way. We do the education, we expand the mind, but if we don't address risk, it moves back into its original shape. Now, a small group of our prospects could see us like the bread and milk guy. So let's take a quick look at the bread and milk guy. He's having a hard time because he's got to get bread and milk because there's going to be a snowstorm. He's having a meltdown. So if you want to have some fun, I recommend you look up bread and milk and you'll see what I mean. So a small percentage of the people will be alarmists, and you can't help them with their change. Maybe 15%. So maybe we're not looking for better than an 85% close ratio with new prospects. So how do we discover the internal dialogue? Well, we ask great questions, don't we? And we ask questions to smoke out the closing conditions. The closing conditions are the set of conditions which, when met, result in the sale. So metaphorically, to picture them, we say that each condition is a glass, an invisible glass on the prospect's desk. For instance, meet urgent needs is the name of a glass. And in the fact-finding stage, we have to learn the names of all the glasses, and we use a very sophisticated procedure to do that. And then in the proving stage, we fill the glass. So we have meet urgent needs, the salesperson's got my back, the company's got a great reputation, and the offer has value. Assume for the moment that we've done some great smoking out, we've learned the names of the glasses, we filled the glasses, it looks like we're ready to go into a closing routine. So we prove the case, We test for a fit. We say, hey, it sounds like we have a fit. The prospect agrees. We ask the hesitation question. Is there any reason to hesitate in going forward? He says no. But it turns out the prospect has a boss who needs to approve this. Could also be a partner. So the prospect says, listen, I just need to talk to my boss or my partner. This is a done deal. So it seems pretty good. And you leave and you couldn't be happier. You don't walk out of the meeting, you float out of the meeting. You can't wait to get back to your colleagues or your boss and tell them what a great sales call you had. However, the days are passing and you're not closing the sale. It seemed like a great story with a great ending when you left the prospect's office. It seemed like we all lived happily ever after. But as time passes, it looks like the ending has changed, maybe to happily never after. And it might be because of risk, because we did not deal with risk. Maybe the prospect sees us like that little helium balloon, and the prospect is safe in the hot air balloon, and that's where the prospect wants to be. So why might the prospect see us as very risky? The problem of risk aversion. We, by our nature as people, tend to avoid risk. Daniel Kahneman, winner of the Nobel Prize in Economics, studied the problem of risk aversion over a period of 50 years and proved through his experiments why it's true. The proverb that we know, one in the hand is worth two in the bush, he showed why it's so. He did an experiment in risk aversion, as like the one we're about to do. We're going to do a thought experiment. Let's say you have a choice. You could have this $5,000 bill. It's a thought experiment. It's not real. So what would you rather do? This is Madison, by the way, on the $5,000 bill. You could have the $5,000 bill, or we toss a coin. When we toss the coin, if it comes up heads, you get 10,000. If it comes up tails, you get nothing. So what would you rather have? $5,000 sure thing, or the coin toss? Heads, you get 10,000. Tails, you get 0. The expected value of the coin toss is 5,000. Which would you prefer? Well, if you're like most people, you prefer the sure thing because you know you have it. And that's what Kahneman found, is that virtually all people rather have the sure thing. Well, how about a sure thing of $4,000 versus a coin toss? Which would you rather have? The coin toss seems like it's worth more, but you could also wind up with nothing. Well, here's what Kahneman found. On average, people would prefer as little as $2,500 to avoid the coin toss, which has an expected value of $5,000. Isn't this another way to understand a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush? So I think Kahneman proved through these experiments, through these thought experiments, what we've known to be true for maybe centuries or millennia. Now, how does that apply to risk and the prospect buying from us? How does the prospect look at us as a new supplier? How do they look at the risk? If the incumbent vendor is doing a decent job, then if we meet the competitive price, isn't it like the existing vendor is the sure thing and we're the coin toss? This leads to the idea of a risk premium. The new customer usually wants a better first price to cover the premium. They don't know that we're going to deliver. They see us as a risk. And these are major reasons we need to prove strongly. First, just to close the sale, to overcome the perceived risk. But secondly, to get a fair price for our product and service, to reduce the risk premium. An important source of risk aversion is skepticism. Perhaps you had this experience when you bought a used car. Think back to when you bought a used car. Do you remember what the weather was like? If you were like me, you bought this used car on a sunny day. It was in the summer. It was a warm day. You felt the heat of the sun beating on your neck. You were sweating a little, and not just from the sun, but because you had to make a huge decision. Are you going to buy this sunny day used car? But there it is on the lot. It's beautiful. It's got 4 doors. It drives. It does everything you want. And the price is the amount of money you have available. So you go ahead and you take the plunge. You buy the car. Now it's no longer the summer. It's 3 months later. It's fall. It's cold. It's windy. It's raining. It's raining hard. It's raining cats and dogs. The rain is pounding on the roof. It's raining outside of the car, and as you've probably guessed by now, it's raining inside of the car. There's about 3 to 4 inches of water accumulating in the driver's well. There were sheet metal perforations, rust. You didn't pick that up when you bought the car on a sunny day. But now you've got it. You're picking it up because you're sopping wet. How do you feel? You're cold. Emotionally, how do you feel? You feel stupid. Now, perhaps you have never bought a sunny day used car, but I'm going to give you an inside tip. Every decision maker, every buyer with whom you're interacting has bought his or her own version of a sunny day used car, and they're skeptical of when you come in here and they see a risk. So how do we deal with it? There's also the issue of the false positive versus the false negative. We've all heard the expression, nobody gets fired for hiring IBM, very often staying with the incumbent. But what does a false positive do for us, or do to the prospect? If the decision maker recommends a new supplier and it's a disaster, that's your false positive, everybody in the organization knows. If the decision maker doesn't recommend us, misses a great opportunity, who knows? So this pushes the prospect to look to favor the false positive versus the false negative. There's an asymmetry. If we don't deal with the prospect's perceived risk, all we tend to close is layups. And the danger that exists is salespeople often tailor their sales call to the easiest to close prospect. So what's a layup? It's somebody who comes in ready to buy. It's a prospect who's rebuying or renewing a relationship. Or somebody who's like walked in the door with a very, very, very warm referral. So if we don't deal with prospects' perceived risk, we may never close new customers that we go out and solicit on our own. All too often, in many companies, another source of risk is the salesperson's attitude towards gratitude. You see, it takes a whole team, usually, of people performing in operations to make a salesperson be able to be successful. There are some toxic salespeople out there who sees themselves as better than everybody else. Standing on everyone's back, they crow about themselves. Now, this could be seen as very risky to a company that has a team approach to doing business. What they're looking for are salespeople who are pushing and pulling in the same direction and validating and praising the rest of the team. Now, there are two key reasons, at least, why a salesperson should have gratitude. First, for having prospects and customers, but secondarily, they should have gratitude because of the team that's supporting them. So if we don't show a team attitude when we sell, this is another reason why we seem risky to a prospect. To deal with risk aversion, are there any Jedi mind tricks, such as these aren't the droids you're seeking, or perhaps reframed as there is no risk in dealing with us? Are there any? Well, there are lots of antidotes to risk aversion. To learn more about the importance of smoking out risk, the balanced sales presentation, the 4-step proving process, give us a call or send us an email. Thanks for listening to this webinar. Bye now.